Happy Thursday, folks. How's everybody's week going?
Pretty good for me.
And Sam, since you're here, I dropped a message over to OCI. I think we're coming due for a new TUB election here. And I haven't seen that go out yet, but I don't know. I won't see that because it's only going to go to the OCI members, not to the overall community.
That happens January, though, I think.
I think nominations should open up now, though.
Nominations might open up now, but yeah. You sent a note to
So
Jory.
I sent to the operations email. I think Jory asked that we use that way in case she's ever not around. It goes to other folks that can jump on things.
That's fair. If you don't mind, I'm happy to be CC'd on that.
Oh, yeah. Usually once she sees it, she just jumps in and throws the PR out in the TOB repo, and that gets taken care of.
But I don't think
All
nominations happen via GitHub repo for those ones.
it's
That's the
more
thing that gets
just
sent out to the
it
members.
yeah, it's more just that it's notifying that it's happening. So it usually gets an issue out there for that one. Let me see. At least Amy's done that in the past. It's just tracking if the election itself is happening is kept public. So I'm looking for the 2003 one. And I need the actual this one. Yeah, so I'll just drop in the chat here real quick. They just sent out a notification that says, hey, we're doing it. Nominations are open, yada, yada. And then there's a message afterwards that just says, here's what the result was. So hopefully that will get taken care of. But just figure I'd give you a heads up that I did give them a ping. So hopefully they see that and work on it. All right, we got a good crowd here today. Make sure I get everybody checked in real quick. So there's only one thing on the agenda. If folks want to talk about other stuff, please throw it on the agenda or throw it in the chat wherever makes sense for you. And otherwise, I'll go ahead and show off kind of where I've gotten to. I actually threw a README together, so this might help make a little bit more sense of what's happening. To have something you can play with at home. This is also on my repo. This is linked. If you click that link, that's the one I'm looking at here in the notes. I can even, for folks playing along from the meeting, I can put it in the chat. One more link for everybody to click. So you got that working for you. And in here, a whole bunch of variables, a whole bunch of configurations. Some of this is pretty normal. The registry, whether it's got TLS, the repo, the user password, that's kind of standard we pulled from before. I do have a YAML file that you can use to set all these options. And so you can override that with an environment variable. Say, here's the new YAML file to load. The results directory, this version number sets a default version for everything. And so if you change this to say only support the 1.0 version of the spec, it disables certain API calls, flips that automatically. And things that are switching is like the reverse API. It says don't expect that. And I think I also did the anonymous blob mount. I think I have to double check that one.
Wait, is this the
And other
existing set or the those environment variables? Is that the
So
existing set that's there?
these are all the variables that I've added for my test. And so you can
Okay.
compare that with the old README of how they worked before with just, pass these. One thing I did do though was in my configuration as I'm loading it, this was some of the work this week that I was going through, was I have a section in here that loads in the legacy environment. And so anything in here that looks like it's the old entry in there, I convert it to the new entry. And at the same time, I just pop a big warning to the screen. It just says, hey, you're using the old variable. Please use the new ones. But then, yeah, once you get down here, all of these tend to get a whole lot of new variables here that we haven't seen before. So the pull and push has been there before. Before we had, I think, just one delete. I've got a delete for the blobs. I got a delete for the manifest. I got a delete for the tags. I've also got a flag in there that says my delete is atomic or not, because we had a question at one point. Someone said, can this be an eventual consistency versus, an immediate? And some of the tests in there assume that if I say delete, it's deleted right away. And I think there are people that care about that, folks that want to know that when I delete something, it's really deleted right away. And so I feel like it's nice to call it out in the conformance of whether or not the registry supports that, but I want to make it optional for the registry to test against that if they don't want to test it. And anything in here that the person turns off, it just gets noted in the report that, hey, we ran this conformance with this setting so that folks know if not, it's not there. I will call out, Ron, since you're saying hopefully everybody used the default values. I think I saw Zot was one of the registries that was having challenges with the atomic test. I think it might be eventually consistent in a few places. Yeah, and then down here, a whole bunch of data. But to your point, Rom, I kind of called out the top. Most registries can just be tested by setting the registry, repository, and login. Everything else, you just leave the default and it should just work for you. So all of these, most people are just going to leave out of the box settings. The data, most people just leave out of the box settings. If you're on GitLab, you might have to turn off the artifact and some of the other things in there because we start passing an artifact type and we're not on their whitelist or their pre-approved list out there. I have not yet created a sparse manifest. Once I do, I know I'm going to break everybody, including myself. So that's still to be done. And I have not yet pushed a SHA-250, a SHA-512 manifest, but I do test it with the blobs. So I got a bunch of that. And then I know the last time we were asking about read-only registries. So if somebody wanted to test like MCR, some of these other registries out there where you can't push the registry, you just want to make sure you can pull. I believe before this was only a single tag, a single manifest, single blob. I now have a space separated list, so you can just pass a whole bunch of them if you want to test more than one. Do all the tests you want to in there. And then all of this is also an YAML file. So if you want to do an YAML file, you can do that as well, instead of passing a bunch of environment variables. It kicks off with a go run command, or you can build it and run /conformance. I even just today add a Docker container out there, so that's available. Folks want to kick that off that way. The image itself isn't being pushed up to GitHub Container Registry yet, but I kind of want to do that. If that'd be a good talking point today. I haven't yet done the actions and the results. It throws out a report out there. I did work on the report a little bit this week or past week. So it's a little bit prettier. This is when you load the page up, it just shows right up like this and says, okay, you got this many passed, when it started, when it stopped, what version of the spec you're testing against, what commit of the conformance test you're using, your full configuration. So if you turn anything off, that shows up in here. I do censor all the stuff that needs to be censored, usernames, passwords, that sort of stuff. And then each one of these things, it automatically expands all of the fields in there. So it says, hey, I've got this this whole tree to expand, but then I compress down the individual leaves. And so when you open up a leaf, you'll see I sent this request, got this response. Or you go down and say, I want to look at this anonymous blob mount. This thing says, hey, I got a 202, but it fell back to the post put. And that's what the spec says you're supposed to do. So you don't support the anonymous blob mount, but you're at least implementing the API as it's supposed to be implemented if you don't support it. So I try to flag those as best I can. And so, yeah, it's all out here. I'm testing SHA-512 blobs, testing all the 256 blobs. I even test the empty blob. I need to put a configuration option so that if you have an empty blob, some registries don't want to support that. So I need to put that in there. Let's see. The image push. This is just simple image. I've got an uncompressed image out there. I've got an index. I've got a nested index. So if you want to have an index that inside of your index, you're also packaging up a nested index, you can do that test. I have got, let's see, scrolling through all this stuff, artifacts in here. The artifacts that I'm pushing contain an artifact type of vendor example OCI conformance. I'm considering, do I want to put some kind of random value in there so people can't test against well-known and then maybe have a well-known out there separate so you can test both and say, we support well-known artifacts, but not arbitrary artifacts. Want that be some kind of condition the registry can do. Because in other places I do, see, not there, but I do have a section down below where I start pushing some random data for other fields. An index of artifacts. So you can have an artifact that is itself an OCI index that has multiple artifacts inside of it, but it also has its own application type in the index itself. The refers is tested in here. I make sure everything gets pulled up from the refers. So yeah, the artifact with a subject. Each of those come up there with a subject, the artifact type, and then at the very end, there's going to be a subject way down here. And hey, even annotations are in there. So mention that there's some random strings in the annotation. So hey, here's an annotation with a random value. I've got random data in the layers themselves as well. But then the subject itself has the media type before I'm pointing it to. I also test the subject if the subject itself isn't pushed. So you can verify whether or not the registry supports it when the subject is there or is not there already. The index with the subject, or index with the subject. The missing subject is the one I was just talking about, where I push an artifact, it's got a subject defined, but the digest of the subject is not pushed already, so we can make sure registries do or don't support that. The data field I'm testing, non-distributable layers, test those. And then custom fields goes through and starts putting custom data all over the place. So let's see, is this a config? That's empty body there. Not that one. Somewhere in here I'll have a config. Not that one. Okay, so in the config, I've got the layers that have some arbitrary data in there, but I also will have just a random extra field at the end here, which is just arbitrary crazy string in the config that I push up. And I also am doing that in the manifest as well. I throw an arbitrary field in the manifest. It's just random extra random data in there. Do you work if I still push some extra random field that's not part of the spec? So that's in there. Let's see, more custom stuff. And yeah, so that is all the tests I've done so far. I'm sure there's more to, well, not sure. I know there's more to do. I've got that on my to-do list here still. There's more stuff I need to add in there. But I'm trying to hit with a whole bunch of things. The key idea here, the big headline of the reason we want to do all this was that we wanted to have lots of different kinds of data against all the different APIs and just kind of matrix the whole thing out there and say, does the registry support when we throw all this different kind of data at it to each of these different APIs, and are we getting the right response back from each one? So I did a lot of talking there. Folks have questions. Any registry survivors? Well, I even got my own registry to mess up on one thing. I didn't have non-distributable layers support yet. The distribution project doesn't have refer support, so they get tripped up by a few of those. They also got tripped up by the SHA-512 in there. And I've tested it on Zot, and Zot got tripped up by a couple of the blob APIs and the atomic do a delete and immediately see if I can do a head request on that manifest or blob. And I think there's a race condition in there where every once in a while I get a response back that says, hey, it's still there. So far, finding all kinds of things out there that I think are important to find. Um,
Did we officially deprecate the non-distributable layers? Seems like something
we,
we shouldn't enforce by default.
yeah, we did deprecate to say that people shouldn't be creating them, but I'm still testing. I pretty much test all the data just to say that someone might
I mean, we
already
should
have one
have
that
it
was,
there, but if we're
yeah.
talking about like defaults and stuff, I would think that, or you just want to just go big and just turn everything on and see how it breaks.
I pretty much turned everything on, but then left it up to the user if they want to say, look, our registry just, we jumped on this one and just turned it off. We've said that you shouldn't be creating new, but it doesn't mean someone doesn't have an old image out there they want to copy. And that's easy enough if we want to change that, that we can go in and say as soon as we get to the 1.1, at one point I did have that turned off, but we can just tweak this in here and just put a section in. Right now I turn off, so I do turn off the anonymous melts and the refers API if you're on a 1.0. So we could just as easily in there say turn off the data. But at present, I haven't turned any data off except for the sparse, just because I know how many registries we're going to break when we start doing a sparse manifest where you don't have all the different platform specific manifest within an index pushed. I'm sure that's going to break everybody, including my own registry, and I'm pretty sure everybody else as well.
Yeah, there are assumptions about that built into a lot of workflows.
Yep.
So that's not something that's easy to say should be on by default.
Everybody does any kind of validation testing, get tripped up by that one. So I figured I would leave that one as the one option I turned off, but I feel like a lot of this other stuff we kind of want to have in there. And then if a registry says, hey, I know you guys want to test this, but I don't have it, they can turn it off. And it just gets noted in the results that this registry supports everything except this.
I really appreciate the granularity in both the testing and in the configuration. That's really cool.
Yeah, so we got that. Um, just kind of looking through some of the different things I need to keep working on my to-do list right now. I got some various edge cases. A lot of this is all happy path testing, and so I needed to go through and test if I start saying chunks out of order or send a blob with an invalid digest, or a digest doesn't match the content, start making sure these APIs start throwing backup errors at us. So that's still to be done. And at some point, I'm gonna have to make the GitHub action that people call to kick this stuff off with. And the conformance repo itself receives all these, and that's gonna need some work. So the OCI conformance, yeah. So our OCI conformance repo has somewhere in here one of these generators. Yeah, I think it might be this one. Where it's going through looking at the submission, it's looking for the distribution spec, is looking for specific workflows in there that is checking for. So this whole repo over here is going to need to be refreshed and updated to expect some new data coming in. Because what that goes to is what we have. building out this page. So each of these things where it's putting all this is going to have to turn into some kind of matrix of like 2 columns. Here's all the data we support. Here's all the APIs we support. I'll have to get that for each registry. So yeah, that's what I've been busy with. Any questions? Request? More things you want to test?
I mean, once you're at some, I mean, this is an awesome place to be. So I just want to see if you have time to maybe put this out as a blog post also. Like, this is so much work. I think deserves some kind of an announcement and stuff like that, right?
I think that'll come at the end. Once we have the GitHub action that people can kick off and the conformance repo itself. Right now, this is sitting in my personal repo. A good thing for me to do, I think we're right around the point that I can start opening this up as a draft PR so that people can follow along with the progress. And when I say follow with the progress over here, pull up the history, it's a lot of work in progress commits right now. And so at some point, that's all going to get squashed down to one big commit. So if that was sitting up as draft PR, that might give people a little bit more visibility of, okay, I can follow along the progress over there just to make sure they know what's happening. But yeah, at some point when we push this out, to give an example of some things that happen in here. Oh, it's not in there. I need to get push real quick. Ship it. Okay. Refresh. If they run it with the go test command, it's going to ship this out and that will pop up a big warning in a bunch of places. It just says, hey, oh, by the way, you're running this as a go test and not as the normal way of running it. And so when that happens, a bunch of different output gets shown up in there. So for example, when that goes out, it just pops up a big warning and says, hey, the go test method of running this is deprecated. Please switch over to go build and launch it that way. And then it's all documented in the README of how they should be doing it. In addition, if you kick that off and you even try to submit it that way, what file do I want to look at? I think it's in my config. If you do that, it will pop up a big warning in there. It just says at the top of the page and right under the beginning of it just says, hey, you ran that with a go test instead of go build. You need to switch over. So I'm trying to do a lot of this stuff that people get warned that they're using old things, but it would also be good to have that blog post, like you're saying, Sasha, just so get a little bit more attention because I'm sure people have this just sitting out there not realizing that this has been running for who knows how long in their repos. Another thing we'll probably want to think about is because I'm so good at breaking every registry out there with this, how we want to do our CI for merging this. Do we want to make that a hard block if individual registries miss something, or do we want to make that more of a soft block in the GitHub actions that just say, hey, I tried to run the conformance against this and I saw these errors, but we know some registries are going to fail versus others are going to pass. And maybe run it against multiple registries.
So, Brandon, are you also categorizing this based on the must, should, may, etc.?
Pretty much everything in there. I'm trying to make sure that when I run my test for saying, hey, if I do one of these things of a blob head or whatever, let me pick out something like the some of these in here, just trying to find the right line for some of this stuff. So let's see this one. If it comes out and we're hoping that if they support the direct post, that it's going to respond back, had it created. But the alternative for the registry is that it can respond back that it just had a status accepted and that it wasn't immediately created. So it was like, you should support this. It's nice if you don't. This is the fallback that you accept the request and then the registry is supposed to, or the client is supposed to go through the fallback mechanism there. When that happens, if I see that it wasn't created, I do throw an error, but my error includes this error type that just says, hey, the registry doesn't support this method. And so that comes back up to us of saying, okay, this isn't a hard failure registry. They didn't do a breaking change. They just don't support it. And that's an allowed thing for a registry to do for that API. And so that's where I go gray instead of red. And there are a few of those, like on the delete, if you come up with a accept is what we're hoping for, a not found would also be valid if somehow you deleted ahead of me. But if I get the bad request or a method not allowed, those are permitted, but it just means the registry doesn't support it. So again, I pop up that other error. Yes, I learned that trick a while back, Tianon. I love that little trick, throwing the %.0w as a zero with error. So it goes up there. I can do a errors.is, but it doesn't actually show in the message itself. But going back to your question there, Rom, I think there are a few places that I still need to work on that. That's on my checklist. So I'm still churning through some of those to make sure if I've got anything in there where like a head request isn't supported. I think might be a registry or two out there that doesn't support a head request, so I've got to put that in there. Little things like that. And I don't want to give them a hard fail on the test, but I just want to say the registry doesn't support this. And they're not supporting it a way that we have specified in the AP in the specification that is an allowed response. All right, that was a whole lot of talking from me. Anything else folks want to chat about today, or did I miss anything? Like I say, I need to add more invalid input test. The conformance page needs to go in there. So not done yet, but we're getting there. Mike, how you been? Haven't chatted with you for a while.
I'm good. Busy as heck.
I just got to call people out now and then, just make sure they're doing good.
I really like your new conformance bucket. Looks good.
It's if we get that in there, that'll be the thing that's been holding up all these other PRs of, hey, can we support some other digest types to run through the test? And I've got that easily. I can just add another digest type in there and test that real quick. Bunch of those are all kind of blocked in there. All right. Sajay had to drop, or Sajay is dropping. Good seeing you, Sajay.
Thanks so much, Brandon. It's like awesome stuff. Take it.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Anybody have other things you want to chat about today? Mike's just happy, doing good, busy as all can be. Think like all of us. It's the middle of the holidays. I got a lot of stuff done over the last couple weeks here, but I think I'm going to slow down too because holidays are coming for all of us.
Yep.
So Otherwise, that is all I've got for today. I will do the last call here and then we can wrap up early for folks who want to get back to all your emails and everything else you got to take care of. So, going once, going twice. Curse CI idea. Test as many popular registries as popular, considering a test is good, at least two of them pass any given test. I've honestly considered that, Tinon. That is not as cursed as you think it is. I yeah.
If insanity is true,
I mean, I broke my
two
own registry with this
insane
one.
registries is just as valid, right?
I broke my own little registry doing this, so everything's gonna break. I keep seeing it jump off mute there, Tinon. What are we interrupting here?
I just think we should have a wall of shame because this whole registry self-reporting thing doesn't work
No.
because they're only going to report if the report looks good.
The challenge of us doing it is we need to get accounts on every one of those registries if we want to do push test.
But that's not our released version of the registry, or we're only testing against public. You should be testing against the private because we don't support that version of your.
Brandon, I think we can get accounts. Like we do have budget in OCI. And I think conformance testing
Yeah.
is a reasonable thing to spend that budget on.
I'm less worried about budget and more worried about maintaining the credentials in a CI pipeline in a secure way that doesn't accidentally get leaked at some point.
Yeah, the logistics of that are kind of a pain, but manageable. I think we
Yeah.
could do it.
Yeah, I also think that's a manageable problem to solve.
But like I think managing a set of deployment scripts for a bunch of open source projects is probably harder than managing credentials for some public registries.
Well, I try to make my Ola Reg as easy to deploy as possible. So I'm happy to throw
Yeah.
that in the CI pipeline. It's not a good test registry, though. I think people
Yeah, I
aren't.
mean, that one's easy. Distribution is easy.
Yeah.
But there are others that are, let's say, less easy.
Yeah. Zod isn't too bad. Harbor, I think last time I looked at Harbor, it wants to have like a full root on the host or something like that to do all kinds of stuff. So some of them are more challenging than others. You're right there.
Hmm.
And then all the cloud registries are going to be challenging. If we're only doing read-only tests, the cloud registries are easy. You just point to some read-only repo out there, say, can I pull the BusyBox image, and you're done. But I think people want to make sure that we're actually allowed to do a push, that you lose a lot of granularity when you do the pull test, because all I do with the pull test is just make sure the API works. I don't validate the data that comes back. I don't know what data was supposed to come back. All I can do is just make sure that it gives me some data and the headers look right. But if I push the data, I know exactly the bytes that are supposed to come back, and I know all the little edge cases I'm pushing the registry to make sure it's working with. So not the worst idea, Tina. I have strongly considered the curse CI of just run a whole bunch of registries, and 2 out of 3 is pretty good for me. The one that made me laugh was distribution, that when I would do the cross repository blob mount, that fails of the SHA-512 digest. The mount itself worked, but the pulling of the content after I mounted over to the repository doesn't work. That just made me laugh. Like of all the weird edge cases, I hit something funny in there. All right. I almost freed you guys up a minute ago. I'll do the going once, going twice again here and see if we can make it all the way through, or if we just want to still chat about this. Anything left before we wrap it up? Going once. Going twice. Okay, now we're gone. Thanks for everybody showing up. Now you can do your wave goodbye, Mike. Good seeing you as always. And we'll be back here again next week. Cheers all.
Cheers.
See y'all.